Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Last day of NIWeek. Hopefully, I see at least a handful of you guys survived the party and whatever shenanigans you got into afterwards. Today, I'll be talking about basically replacing XControl. So, getting XControl functionality with dynamically configured views and using DQMH for that. So, jump right in. So, my boss says, start this presentation with a story. And he says, better yet, start it in the middle of the story. So this is where we are. This is maybe about a year ago or so. Every day, open up the LabVIEW project for our main application and open up our main VI to make some edits to fix a bug. And we got just lockdown. This is just in edit time. This is not running a VI. I can't save classes. I can't add members to classes. I can't update locations of things on disk. It's just lockdown. I like to call it the total project lockdown. And face this every day for a few months or so because of some issues that we'll be talking about today. So really, you know you're in trouble when you start writing VIs that unlock your XControls in your project. That may have been the first sign that something was going wrong. We were writing VIs that we had to go and unlock our XControls. We were using XControls to do a variety of things to make things easier for our users. But we were running into issues with them. You also know you're in trouble when you check out all the code from source control and you get the dreaded LabVIEW missing VI of doom. I know I checked everything in source control. Why is something missing? Oh, right, that class was locked. And now it doesn't know about a VI that I'm using somewhere else. And it's always fun to track that down. And then, lastly, when every day you look at that XControl and you just shake your fist at it like John Stewart there, saying that, oh man, I wish that maybe we had done something different. So, every day. Okay, so imagine, if you will, how did we get into this situation? How might you avoid this situation, to rephrase that? We have a very large application that's using a class hierarchy to do test execution, basically. So we have a fairly large, expensive hierarchy set up in our for our application. Along with that, we have some other associated classes to house some configuration data, to do some other kind of associated things along with that. It's not directly related. And then along with that, we developed a really cool XControl. And so the XControl in this case are going to be serving as the view for one of those classes. So it's actually the one on the very far side, the ACP config. So ACP is a type of RF measurement, not important, but that's what I'll be saying for a little while. So when we talk about the ACP test, we're talking about that one. So we create this really cool XControl. It's got some nice buttons where we can load in some different types of standards. We can add channels that we want to do for testing. Make it really so that the end user, the technician, isn't manipulating any sort of like array control or anything like that. We want to make it nice, and implemented a really cool XControl. And then, since we do want it to function as a view for one of our classes, we've lumped them together with into a library so that we can associate them together. Now, when we open up our config VI to display that to the user and put that XControl down, you notice that we have some project locks. Okay, so that's the first step. Just at a time, we got a few project locks. It's just that library, just the XControl, and just the class. That's doable. We don't have to worry about that too much. It's pretty good and isolated, and we don't have to worry. We don't have to unlock that to edit some other associated code in our main VI. It's pretty well isolated. So that's where we start. But is software ever finished? Of course not. So a couple months down the road, maybe we get a request to serialize our project configuration to disk. They want to be able to open it up and read through it and quickly save off states, do the normal serialization thing. So how do we do that? So we go through, we'll jump into code here, there's a test configuration in our hierarchy. Let's just go and add our serializer that we're creating. So add our serializable class. Everything's all right. We have our config VI that's got our XControl in it. And then, okay, so since this is 2016 and we don't have any fun, malleable VI tricks to do interfaces or anything like that, let's just go ahead and change the inheritance so that the test base inherits from serializable. All right, so now when we open up, let's see here, we still don't have our locks, but that's good. Now we go through our tests and say, oh, that ACP config, that's used in a few tests. Maybe we should be serializing that as well. So we go through, we look at our ACP config, we say, okay, well, let's close this config so I can actually do this. Go through, right click, change our inheritance, because we're all familiar with this, to serializable. Great. So now we write our two serial from serial methods. Everything's working great until we start opening up our config VI. Now we see that, oh man, all of our test classes are locked. All of our XControls are locked. Our libraries are all locked. We've now entered total project lockdown. So, what's happening? Let's get back to the slides here. XControls, when you run at a time, they're loading and running basically behind the scenes. So when they run, they lock themselves. Now, since we are using a class and a library, that gets locked because it's been loaded in memory and run. So that gets locked. Since we added that serializable, that class is now the parent, that also gets locked. And then since anything underneath that and all those the children class, those also gets locked as well. So now we're into the situation where, since we don't have a good solution for interfaces, again 2016, that we need to use a kind of a God class that everything gets locked underneath it. So that's our situation. You can also run into this if you're doing if you get some circular dependency issues, this kind of situation will also happen. So if you have like a UI for a class that has an XControl that's maybe calling a member of that class hierarchy somewhere in facade VI maybe, that will also cause this. So you might say, oh, Andy, you should just manage your dependencies better, or why don't you replace it? Well, replacing some of those XControls would be time consuming. We have one in this example, but say that we had 5 or 6, and we have several different sets of classes, and we're overlaying all these project locks, and it ends up being pretty difficult to replace. So we just live with it. We live with it. If we need to make any changes, we get this giant broken control of doom on our front panel, and our run arrow is broken. And it really kind of slows down our development time, because you have to go unlock that XControl, make your changes, hope that you didn't forget to wire up a required input or something, apply the changes for your XControl, go back, look, oh, I did forget to wire up a tunnel or something like that. You have to really be very, very disciplined in your coding, which I like to go a little too fast for that. So it ends up slowing us down. So how do we get to that Shawshank moment where we're escaping lockdown? How do we get there? So we sat down and we decided, okay, let's actually just generate some requirements for this. Let's think about what we actually need to happen to replace those XControls. So what we need to do is we need to have something that can run and keep its own state. We need to be able to display user interface. And we also need to be able to have multiple running at once. So those are the 3 kind of requirements. The example that we're doing with the ACP, that one doesn't necessarily need to run multiple at once, but if you had like a more generic kind of number selecting XControl that does a lot of functionality with right clicks and all sorts of stuff, you may have to run multiple of those at the same time. So maybe like 2 years ago, I think, we're going to NIWeek, going to a session where Darren gets up and does an entire application in 1 hour using DQMH. And both my coworker and I came out of that presentation and we were like, that's exactly the solution that we wanted. We didn't want to have to do a lot of this ourselves. A lot of those requirements you get with DQMH straight out of the box. So we went back and said, okay, let's go download that, install a View package manager, and get everything up and running. For those of you not familiar with DQMH, this is kind of like how you go about creating a module. You just tools, Delacore, DQMH, add new DQMH module. We wanted to set it to be clonable in this case, and then the base module itself will need to maintain the VI status and manage any sort of communication you might need. That'll be important later when we're going to be working with this in our code. So, create a new module. Again, that's what you would go through and do. Name it, give it some ugly green banner set to be clonable, and then you're off and running. You click OK, it does its scripting magic in the background. You go get a coffee, come back, and everything's ready to go.
Oh, it doesn't take that long.
No, it doesn't take that long. Well, the coffee's really pretty close to my desk, so.
It's just like 10th of a second.
So this is what we'll be creating. So there's the front panel for that XControl, and we're going to be migrating it over to the main VI of the DQMH. That's good. So I'm going to do like a cooking class, or or I'm just going to add the actual thing from this because I'm going to have to do that while you guys are sitting there looking at me. So this is what you get when you go to the tools, create. Straight out of the box, we have some notes on here. There's also the tester, which I know Fabio would say always use your tester, keep that updated, keep it using. It's not out of the project right now, but there's a really good ability to go in, have our code here. It barely fits on the monitor. Easy producer consumer that we're all familiar with. Even the junior developers on our team could figure out how to use this. So what we want to do is to go through and replace our XControl, and rather than doing all that programming while I'm standing up here, so this will be the finished one. So we've gone through, we've taken the facade VI. The facade VI has some event structured code that we've got in the background, which I could show. And we just copy that. We've just copied that over. I mean, it's all LabVIEW, so we don't necessarily have to do a lot of re-implementation. Here's the facade VI. We don't have to do a lot of re-implementation because we can just move some of this code around. We'll need to break up with that library. We'll have to do a couple other things to get it to work, but once we're done, and this is something that I can do pretty quickly, is you have something that looks like this, where we just copy our code over. Now this is a nice, clean user interface that you can use to click that load standard button and load up in some wireless test standards that you might want to. It maintains its own state. We're good to go. It looks exactly like it did before, which is really important for us because if you've ever deployed something to a technician or operator and then changed the user interface out from under them, you're going to have to pay for that some way or another. So we're going to make sure that it looks exactly the same. The block diagram, we'll see that we're handling some of the button value changes. We've had some consumer events, and everything's nice, happy, nice solid run arrow. So it's in a good state for us. Now, if we want to call that somewhere else, we're going to have to get the data in and out. So to do that, we create DQMH events. So again, if you're not familiar, this is just tools, Delacore, create a new DQMH event, and then it'll detect. And in this case, we'll do the get data. So you've done all your configuration. We're going to just get that data. So we want that to be a synchronous operation. So we set it to be request and wait for reply. Get the data and make sure you add your description so that you know what the heck's going on. And then once you're done with that, you just complete the code. It's pretty simple. You just go through, walk through the steps. It's all outlined on the block diagram. And then once you're done, you end up with something close to this, where you have your get data. When you get a get data user event, It executes the module-specific get data code here. You write your final values to your class, you update it, you send it along in the payload, everything's good to go. So you can use this code now as a pop-up. So when you're calling this code, you can embed, you can get that configuration. So, let's show that real quick. So we run some module instances, we can show the front panel, we can load our radio standards. I got that loaded, so that's going to be fun later. And you can get the data back, which right now this does absolutely nothing. So once you're done, you can stop everything. You've got your nice, clean, tested interface. So that config VI, when you go back in, you can replace that code with something that looks, instead of just your XControl on the front panel, you end up with let's see, let's go. Actually, it's on the presentation. You end up with something similar to this, where you have your start module, you sync your events, you show the panel, and then you handle whatever configuration VI that you're doing. Get the data back out at the very end, everything's good to go. So, now, that would be all well and good if we were using pop-ups. Well, we are using pop-ups, probably too much, but we didn't want to use pop-ups in this case. So there's a couple of updates that we're going to need to do so that we can embed this into a subpanel eventually. The first one was that we modified the module start VI to pass out a VI reference so that we can use that and embed it in the subpanel. And then we also modified the main VI to do that operation there. Instead of starting up hidden, it starts up closed so that you can embed it into a subpanel. And really, it was as simple as that. The finished VI also has that implementation. That was really the only thing that we needed to do to go through. Let's see the initialize. We set it to closed instead of hidden, and we pass out the VI reference from the module start, which I can also show. There's a couple ways you can do the VI reference. In our case, we've tried both of the two ways where you can actually create a request event to get its own VI reference. This happened to have the VI reference it's using already as well, so we kind of like this way a little bit better. It's a little cleaner for our code. So a couple different ways where you can request the actual VI that's running, say, give me your VI reference, and then you can embed that later. So this is also available in the start module. So, and this is nice because.
But why did you use the open VI method rather than calling asynchronously?
Well, that's part of the template.
Oh, okay.
So I can answer that at the end if you want.
No.
Because that is part of the template.
Right. So now, let's see. We go back here.
I'll ask him for
So now we can get some code that looks like this. If we wanted to do show off, we can do the pop-up, and we can embed it into a subpanel, all in the same code. We don't have to do anything differently. We can do a pop-up if we want. We can do a subpanel if we want. We can do them both at the same time if you would ever want to do that for whatever reason. So just showing off these. Don't really need to change much after that. After that, then all I have to do is embed it in a subpanel. Now, the part of this presentation that talks about the dynamically configured views is using dynamic dispatch to be able to pull up the VI reference that you're looking for. That's a fairly simple operation as well. If you're familiar with class hierarchy. Basically, all you need to go through is you have to get the VI ref num or get a configuration reference from all of your classes so that it's defined on the base. Each class usually has some sort of configuration that you want to do for that. And then you embed that into a subpanel. Once you're done, you need to get the config somehow. It's usually going to be stored again on your class data later down the line. But in this simple example, we're just getting that data. So that could be any number of tests with your hierarchy. You can go through and walk through a case like this. So what does that look like in code? So here are our tests we have lined up here. Those got saved. Let's move those here. We wanted to show embedding in a subpanel. You can see that this is the same code I had up on the display. All we need to do is get that start module. It passes out the VI reference. We can sync the module events and then insert it into the subpanel. So run that, pretty much ready to go. The module behind the scenes is handling all of the behind the scenes, kind of running the VI, setting everything that we need to do. That's the important part here, is that we could have done all of that ourselves. We could have gone in and created a whole framework for launching VIs, getting the control references, or getting the controls values, setting those, running the VI asynchronously, keeping track of its VI reference. We could have done all of that for sure, but we really liked that we didn't have to, because all you need to do is, with a simple set of modifications to DQMH, you could get that the subpanel up and running very, very easily. Again, if you load a standard, you can add channels. I must have had that open earlier, so that's good. Loading standards is basically the exact same as we had before, where it's functioning very much the same. So for making this dynamic, again, we're going to still maintain the use of our subpanels. And instead of using the simple, either load the base or load in this case, an inherited VI. And in our code, all we need to do is go through and update for this get data. So I've created these ahead of time. So the get data and the get ref num. For the base, to get the ref num, it's just a static to a dummy VI for this case. This VI, I think, has just a before loop on it and counts to 100 or something like that. Just to show that maybe not all of your tests may have test-specific configuration you might need to do. So if you needed to pass something out like that, you could do something easy. Again, just the static VI and embedding that into a subpanel, all that's going to do is display the current state of that VI. It's not going to run anything. It's not going to do anything else like that. It's just going to be, hey, what's the current state of this VI? And so to build up a lot of that code, you would need to go through, okay, I have a VI reference. Let's go and run that once we've embedded it in the subpanel. Before we embed it in the subpanel, if it needs to be clonable, then you have to manage all of those module IDs. It's a lot easier this way. This way being, all I have to do is create an override VI. This is locked, so it's going to be not going to work for me right now.
Stop the tester.
Is the tester running?
Yeah. Either the tester or the code that you were showing us.
Yeah, I think it's that pop-up that's still going. Let's save it for sure.
Sure, love, whatever you say.
However I changed that seems good. So let's go back to the project. And all we need to do the dynamically configured views is override the get ref num. And when we override the get ref num, we can replace that code with what we saw in our other configuration for the subpanel, which is just this code right here is all we need to do. This is some hate programming with the touchpad.
You're a brave soul. There's a reason I do recording. And it's not only that I like to go fast.
All right. Shall we see what Fuck Diagram Cleanup does to this? Just for fun. Yay! That one's actually okay. So all we need to do is override this to get the VI ref num, and then in the case for getting the data, it's a very similar operation where we just go get the data, we override this VI, and then we call that same set of code here. Okay. One thing that I'll point out and that you may notice is this wire here. So that's the module ID, since it's an asynchronous EI. Where is it? There it is. This is the module ID. So we do need to keep track of that since this is set to be clonable. That's just one thing that we need to keep track of for this. If this was not set to be clonable, then we don't have to worry about that. So keep that in mind when you're programming DQMH applications. And you need to manage you do need to manage at least one thing yourself. But we can make that part of the class data. Change this representation. Show LabVIEW. Good, compiling, saving, and when we get the ref num, we'll write this module ID at the same time, and then we can use that.
You didn't wire it up.
It's not wired. I did it. It's just real ugly.
Oh, okay.
This is a live demo, man.
Sorry.
No problem. And then when we get the data, around. So now, this is about all we would need to do to get our dynamically configured view. So you can see this is the red class, that's the test C class. If we say it's false, we'll go ahead and load that one. It will call the get ref num for that implementation, which again is just going to be starting up the DQMH module, syncing the events, and then caching off the module ID in this case. So let's see, load the base. Let's load base first. So dummy VI, just a numeric, is being loaded there. Turn that off. Restart the VI. See that it's loading the DQMH module. And so you could probably do this with a couple times practice in about an hour. Which, don't ask me how I know that. But it's really very simple to go through and create a specific configuration panel for your tests.
It's the versus how long it would take you to do the same with an XControl.
So right, first of all, you have to learn how to use an XControl. So that's always I mean, if you're familiar with XControls already, okay, maybe it's a little bit easier, but personally, my coworker implemented all of the XControls, so whenever I have to go and deal with them, I actually just tell him to go do it. Yeah, versus how much to do this way is much easier. This also serves a few extra functions. That we could talk about. XControls really don't function well as the view of a class. We'd all like them to function better as the view of a class, I think. But if you put your class in the data of the XControl, you're asking for getting a lot of your product to lock down. You shouldn't be afraid of the sub panels. I know some of the junior developers at our company have some sort of apprehension about using them, but they're very powerful. So if you haven't used them before, definitely check them out. The module themselves created from DQMH are very easy to use. Like we said, implementing something in an XControl versus implementing it in DQMH in a modular fashion, probably DQMH for me is going to be a lot faster to do. There's a learning curve associated with XControls. They don't function kind of like LabVIEW you expect them to, and there's all sorts of drawbacks in terms of using those. The functionality of DQMH modules can be expanded. Don't feel like you need to take everything that's scripted for you straight out of the box and make it your own. Create the company DQMH version if you need to. And then that configuration module, you could expand that. That could be the ACP module that just handles all of the test execution for that one part. It doesn't have to be just for the configuration. It's one step on a journey of modularizing your entire code and separating views from your business logic and all that kind of stuff. So all we have to do is couple 3 giant frameworks together, and then you have easy to manage. No, it's actually fairly simple to couple the dynamic dispatching and DQMH and subpanels to get a really clean and easy to put together configuration for your tests. Imagine instead of just a single subpanel, you had a tree control or a multi-column list box or something along the side where you have a bunch of other configurations that you need to do, or you're just keeping track of what's being clicked on and then embedding that into a main subpanel. And then now you have a really clean configuration for your tests that the operators aren't going to be coming to your desk and saying, hey man, you're popping up too many times with pop-ups. I would like all this in one place. So it's very simple to go through and do that, and we've had some great success with that. So and that's it for me. Appreciate it. If there's any questions, field those in.
Is there any performance difference between different types of control and
So the question is there any performance difference between using XControl and DQMH? It was a user interface application, so we didn't do a lot of characterization in terms of performance. The XControl is more of a native solution, so it seems snappier. But since it is just popping up a configuration panel to the user, we didn't feel like any sort of performance impact was going to really affect the overall flexibility that we were getting. So that's a good question. XControls do tend to be a little faster, but this was way more flexible for us.
If you need a little bit more performance, you can start up your pop-up VI before or during program initialization.
Sure.
And then it goes.
Yeah, sure. So the comment was if we need to make it more performant, it's you can go and initialize things rather than the way that we've got it here. So, which is actually what we've done in our application. That the test that's selected gets initialized and then displayed to the user. It goes pretty quick. I'm sure if you had a DQMH question, Fabio would be happy to jump in here as well.
Or are you saying that I like to talk? No, that's
I didn't say that.
Is it true that you just became the first center of excellence for LabVIEW in Texas?
Yes. So
Is that a plant?
I believe there's a plant in the back, but yes, our group in Corvo IDP and Richardson just became the first center of excellence in Texas.
I can do it.
We beat up Chris and his team by a matter of weeks, I think, but still,
you did, yeah.
We did it. Well, thank you very much. If there's any questions that you don't want to ask in the big forum, come up and talk to us. I'm sure we'd love to hear about your application. Thank you.